about being in the city. It energizes you. You hear the noise, the sort of rumble of the subway. You feel like you're part of something, even like you're plugged in a way.
One of the interesting things about Elyn's work is how she works with stone and uses the various different finishes and textures and treatments, and the way that those stones are sited to take advantage of those, to use the reflective qualities of a polished stone surface versus the more rustic appearance of, of a textured or a boulder-like finish as well. And that actually tied in with some of the things we were doing in the building, where we were using the Mombasa stone in different finishes as well, and in some cases exposing the rough surface of that stone and using it as a contrast to the smooth white stucco surfaces of the rest of the building. The kind of the rough and the smooth playing off one another, which is something I think I've seen in a number of Elyn's pieces.
The project for the Tanzanian embassy was a real challenge because I wasn't able to go to visit the site before I had to come up with a plan for the sculpture. The embassy had been bombed a couple of years ago, so it was totally rebuilt. I did go and meet the architects in Washington in their office, saw the models, saw their drawings, and we talked a long time about the kind of materials they were using and what was available in Tanzania.
The compound has a couple of different entry points, the main entrance being here with a driveway leading to the drop-off, and the consular entrance, which is the one that people seeking visas to the United States would use here. And our goal was to really create a series of spaces that allowed people to circulate through the site and connect these spaces with a central access, which was accented with water. The water feature that runs through the site begins at the consular courtyard at this end of the site, and then it becomes this rill that runs through the initial palm court, the main garden space of the NOB, and then the palm court, which is formed by the Chancery building and the US Aid building, and terminates here at the entrance to the facility. It seemed as though that area was an excellent opportunity to locate a piece of art.
Whenever I do a project, I try to think about what the location is, what the history of that site is, what materials are available there. And then for myself, to think about inspiration, I went off to the Metropolitan Museum to see their collection of African art. I just started thinking about Africa and African art. After visiting the Metropolitan Museum, they conveniently have a wonderful bookstore, and in looking through these, particularly looking for things from the area around Tanzania and Tanzania itself, I found these images of these stools that I found to be just so interesting for many reasons. The repeated forms of the legs. Here too, these stools, this one in particular from Tanzania, has this sculptural quality. This other form here, just the shape of it, this musical instrument from Tanzania, a very simple form, but very elegant. And then the neck piece and so on almost makes it look like a figure. In looking through these books, you find shapes that are somewhat eccentric. They're not exactly ovals, they're not exactly circles, they're not square, but they have a wonderful form. So when I sat down to start making drawings, I just began letting my imagination run with what kind of forms I could make. And just began sketching these things and thinking about height and shape and I'm not an anthropologist, but the idea of gathering together, and I thought, you have this pool, what about things standing around it? And as I was thinking about the forms, I began to think of them as a family or a group. And that sort of got me going, and then I just made lots of sketches and finally came to something that I liked. But I had to find the stone, and we worked for 6 weeks or more trying to find an African, an African material in Africa, and that didn't work. And finally, I've worked for many years with a company called Cold Spring Granite, and I called them and I said, do you have any blocks of African stone? And it so happened they did, because they have a lot of things they import from all over the world. And they sent me a sample, and it was beautiful. It was just so beautiful, and it worked really well with the limestone they're using on the surface of the building on the embassy. So I went out to Minnesota, brought my model, brought the drawings, and said, do you think you can do this? We have a short time frame. And they said, sure. They have these diamond saws with blades that are 8 feet in diameter. They're just gigantic. They cut the first cuts with a wire saw that has to constantly be adjusted because each cut is on a certain pattern, a certain curve. And it's all hooked up to a computer, but it moves very slowly. So it gets started, and about 2 days later, the piece is actually cut out. The pieces are 8 inches thick, and they're 8 feet tall. So it's a lot of cutting. I made a drawing of a line that I wanted it to be handmade looking. So I made a series of lines, and they copied them to be able to cover the whole surface. And then they were able to sandblast or water jet the pattern. When it came to the pattern that has like a series of dots, those were hand chiseled, and I would just take a sort of grease pencil and mark where I wanted the dots to be, and a very large guy with a large chisel and hammer would go along and do it. And we worked for about a week there. Then I came back, and when they got some of the pieces cut, the slabs cut, I went back there to look at them and make any final adjustments. And I was there for 4 or 5 days and saw 2 of the pieces complete, and then they shipped them out. When you start putting these big pieces together, and there's cranes and equipment, and what was once a fragment of paper all of a sudden becomes three-dimensional and real, and the sunlight's falling on it, it's making a shadow. It's great, it's really exciting, and you really feel like you've accomplished something.